So let me again welcome everybody to this DigiConnect University. We will have very exciting program for you with 16 sessions on what digital and green have to do together. We will have everything anybody can find session of interest. I'm sure about that. We will have all the major technologies and what they can do for climate and environment. We will also entertain with young people what they can do for climate change and what we also have to do to avoid misinformation around the climate change. So before we actually go into the speeches of today, let me tell you the Slido. On the Slido that we have green economies, hashtag green economy, where you can pose the questions to the speakers of today. And you can also find more information, or if you want to post some of your questions or comments. So before we launch in the session of the day, let me introduce the speaker, the first speaker, that is the General Director of DG Environment, Florica Fink-Hoyer. Florica Fink-Hoyer is the Director General of the Director General Environment. She is in charge of policies such as circular economy, biodiversity, and zero pollution. But not only that, she also works on green claims and chemical strategy and many other things that are part of the Green Deal. She has had several senior positions in the Commission, in 2 cabinets. She serves in 2 cabinets. She has worked on a response and emergency response team and programs, as well as in humanitarian aid. She has joined DG Interpretation in 2016 as General Director, and she is not stranger to digitalization because she already introduced digitalization program of interpretation from artificial intelligence to speech recognition and knowledge management. So Florica, please welcome to the first session of the DigiConnect Summer School on Digital for Our Planet.
Thank you very much, Elias. And I'm not 100% sure, but I was told that I was supposed to give a little bit of a scene setting, so as to say why there is this link between digital solutions and environment and climate change and biodiversity. Is that right? Because then I would start with that scene setting.
Yes, you are the scene setter, and you can also give your opinion, because I would like to explain to our participants that this commission has 2 strong pillars, and that is the green transition and digital transition. And you, as a leader of the green transition, will put a setting, and then Roberto, who is the leader of the digital transition, will put his setting, and we will hopefully have some questions to entertain for both of you.
Okay, fine, that's great. And then I will start a bit from my side, but I would start with a question, and the question might now perhaps be puzzling for you, but the question is there water on Mars? Yes, there is water on Mars, and actually it's in the form mainly of ice. But I'm actually quite sure that as a citizen, you are much more interested probably whether the water that comes from your tap is of good quality. And in fact, the water of the tap water quality and also the quality of the urban wastewater, the basin water, so the water in our lakes and rivers, is not only regulated in the EU to very high standards, but it's actually also regularly measured. And most of the time, this is measured digitally. Now, you might also want to know when you leave your house, you go to school, you go to work, you want to know what is the quality of the air you're breathing, not just because you are perhaps having allergies, but actually because pollution, air pollution, is one of the biggest contributors to premature deaths in Europe. And when you buy a shampoo or when you order food, you want to know what is in it. Is this something that might be a chemical that is bad for my health, but also bad for the environment if it is released back into the water? Or is the food that I'm buying related in one way or another to the deforestation of the Amazon? So thanks to digital solutions, the quality of the air, of the water, is analyzed and can be sent via apps to your smartphone. And in the future, we want to have what we call a so-called passport for products, electronic passport for products, that would allow you to know what is in it and where does it come from. And we'll speak about that a bit later. So possibilities to push data on your phone are endless in principle. And why does it matter? It matters, and why is there a link also for green transition and green economy? It is because we have to look first and foremost, what are the environmental and planetary challenges that we need to address? And then you know why we have to measure them. Because we all know by now that the atmosphere is warming, that we have climate change. What is becoming a bit clearer that climate change is exacerbating the loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity loss means that we have not the oceans, not the forest in the good health status, so that they can work as natural carbon sinks. And that's very important for us, because if they collapse, they will have a huge damage, more than we can compensate with reducing industrial emissions. And they're also important, these ecosystems, for food security, for health, for prosperity and security. So that's why we looked at the European Green Deal and tried to see how do we can measure these the status of these ecosystems, of the air quality, the water quality, and all of this. What is the status of the ecosystems? And these ecosystems are not only important for our health and for the environmental health, actually the economic costs of their decline are actually huge. And there are some, of course, everything is measured, also that. So the first decade of the millennium has already gave loss to up to 20 trillion of US dollars per year, because ecosystems or ecosystem services were no longer delivered in the way they should, or in the oceans, or deforestation or land degradation alone. It cost sort of like 20 billion US dollar per year. So these economic costs will rise if the ecosystems will go down. And ecosystems actually are complex systems. They have a tipping point, which means once we reach a tipping point, they cannot be restored, but they're lost, actually lost forever. So we would not only miss economic benefits, but also, health goes down and everything else, if we were not to take care and measure the status of our ecosystems. Actually, you might have seen that in some big newspapers or magazines, there's a leading investor that systematically puts ads on that speaks about pollinators as entrepreneurs and industrialists worth 150 trillion US dollars in forest industry alone. And indeed, pollinators are crucial for the functioning of our ecosystem, for the food system, for medicine, and for well-being. And actually, the World Health Organization has stated that there is a direct link between the destruction of our ecosystems and COVID, because we are breaking down the buffer zones that the scientists say protect us normally from wildlife-borne viruses and zoonotic diseases like COVID. So in a way, you could say nature starts sitting back. So the loss of biodiversity is an environmental and a moral issue, but it's also having a tremendous social impact on our economy, our security, our livelihoods, and so on. And that's where the Green Deal comes in. And that's where we also need to measure what's being destroyed or what we want to restore and protect. Because that's how we want to go about, because we want to have a new form, a circular economy form, where we have more sustainable ways of production, but also consumption. And actually, just right now, there was The Economist, this magazine you might know, which just ran an article that explained in very clear terms the role of digital technology in protecting and restoring these precious ecosystems. Because if you go and look at remote sensoring and satellite data, all this helps us to monitor pollution, climate change, but also biodiversity loss. And that helps us in order to model and project scenarios. And that means we can also identify solutions. And so digital technology, high-speed networks, high-performance computers, data management solutions, applications, artificial intelligence, all are crucial to bring together this data and to help analyze, assess, and communicate about the risk, and then we can take action. So digital solutions are actually enablers to help us to protect and restore what we need to protect and restore. And such data is very powerful, and digitally generated data helps us to raise awareness and helps us to advocate for change. And therefore they're important, because understanding the problem is obviously the first step to solving a problem. And as we always say, what gets measured gets acted upon. So if we know now by digital technology, we can help monitor the state of the forest or the oceans. We can also preserve or help restoring ecosystems and species, because we can quantify them. And we quantify the loss, but also quantify whether a norm, for instance, the EU has a lot of norms and regulations to protect the environment, whether these norms are effective. This is also very important, because the data that is generated helps us, for instance, in DG Environment or elsewhere in the Commission, to be used in evaluations, in impact assessments, in order to say what needs to be done to better protect, to better restore, for instance, the environment, or to reduce the chemicals and therefore reduce pollutions. And again, spatial monitoring also helps us to identify which member state might not live up to the expectations or the obligations under these norms, and where there are gaps in compliance. And that is also important. Think about waste treatment and landfills, and again, water management and air quality. So it helps, digital technology helps for contributing to better governance. And that is also something where citizens can act and hold governments accountable. So the twin and the digital agenda are very much aligned, because we want to go for, as I said, regenerative solutions, sustainable solutions. And there comes now the digital products password I already mentioned, which is again and can be a key enabler for what we call the circular economy. So not a linear economy, but a circular, where products are reused, repaired, and so on and so on, which is part of the Green Deal. So what does it mean? The transition to sustainable economy remains more sustainable products, and therefore we need smarter management of product-related data across the entire life cycle of a product. And digital technologies can produce this information. They can tag, trace, localize, and share product data or product-related data along the entire value chain. And that's quite important if you want to change the way we produce and consume. We have proposed that, for instance, now together with DG Connect, such a digital passport for batteries for electric vehicles and industrial applications. That's quite important, because when you make a choice as a consumer, you want to know whether you can buy a battery that can be reused, where you can dispose it. But also for industry, for the workers, it's important to know what's inside, because it's linked to safety, because there can be chemicals inside. There are chemicals inside when they upgrade or reuse or repair a battery. And with all this information that is stored in this future digital passport, we can also retrieve precious metals. And that's quite important for the strategic autonomy of Europe, because when you know that batteries will be increasing 15 times over the next decade in their use and in their importance, then the raw materials that they're inside, and we know they are not produced in Europe, become a very precious raw material, which we want to have as a secondary raw material. So there's a lot we can do. And I would now conclude with the water example I started with, because data collected in the water sector, especially from this sewage monitoring, can be very much used to detect harmful chemical substances, but also help to detect the presence of COVID, and at a very early stage, and even now the new variants of COVID. So if we can detect that through digital measuring in the sewage wastewater, that's quite important for the healthcare and everything else. So this example shows you that it is important to know whether there is water on Mars, but close to home, it is also very important to know and to use the digital technologies for sensing in real time our sewage water. So all this information gives you data-driven knowledge, and that gives you also as a citizen a lot of possibilities, because you can take pictures from waste dumps, from litter on beaches, illegal logging, whatever, and you can share that with others, with the government, so that they can act upon. There are many so-called science citizen projects, and all of this is important, because if we want to go for a regenerative economy, we need all segments of society to help us. And it's not longer only the monopoly of the governments or of the regulators that is important if we want to transition to a new society and a green and digital way of working, because then civil society, NGOs, citizens, they all become the source of information we need if we want to reverse biodiversity loss. A last word of caution at the end. I'm sorry to say it. Yes, we are very keen on the digital twin between digital and green, but digitalization can certainly be a leverage of enhancing sustainability. But the digital transformation itself must obviously also become much more sustainable. And that requires addressing the climate and the environmental footprint of the information communication technology, and including of the data centers, because we will need much more data space and data centers if we want to make this twin work together. So thank you for your attention. I hope that is a bit of a good scene setter. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Florica. I will welcome again the new participants that joined over the last few minutes listening to you, and also indicate that at the sli.do hashtag green economy, they can post questions. So I will welcome everybody again. We have now more than 500 people live. And just to remind you, this is the 6th edition of the DigiConnect University Summer School. We have almost 9,000 registrations that we will try to entertain over the next 2 weeks. And as I said, we have many sessions of interest starting today, giving the basis of what green and digital European perspectives are and what are the activities that we launch at the European Commission level. Now, this is my pleasure to welcome now next speaker, Roberto Viola, who is the General Director and the Honorary President of the DigiConnect University. Roberto has been with us as a General Director for 6 years. Before that, he was Deputy General Director. But his career started early already at ESA, where he was recognized for his patents and for his brilliance, where he worked for 13 years. Some of the patents have been actually now used widely. Then he moved to Italian Regulatory Agency for Telecommunications, Posts and Audiovisual, where he also stayed about 13 years and at the end became the General Director of this agency. So we are glad that we welcomed him in the Commission. He's leading the digital transition of Europe. He's single-handedly developed new strategies like high-performance computing. He is very strong and developed a new program called Digital Europe Program that we hope that with Florica we will coordinate and cooperate and contribute to the green and digital twin transition. And he has also, of course, initiated a lot of other things like EID or even the green passport that he really managed to get off the ground now that we need to travel and we hope to have a normal summer finally. So Roberto, floor is yours. And thank you for participating.
Thank you to you, Elias, for the nice words, and welcome to all of you, to the panelists, to the participants. It's really a pleasure to be here for the summer session and to discuss and understand such an important topic for all of us. The link between the future of our planet and the digitization of our economy and our society. Of course, the two things are intertwined. We made these two priorities, the priorities of Europe, actually, in changing for better. We made these two priorities to exit from the pandemic and from the crisis that resulted from the pandemic. And we call them the twin transitions. So the digital and the greening of our planet. Twins, you know, are a very special type of sisters and brothers. I mean, they know each other, they know them very well, but are they every time friends? This is the key question for our session. I mean, is digitization a good friend of greening? Are they really these magic twins that will change our planet for better? And where to look for areas where this is really happening and what to do more? So Florica already started she did it in a very, very good way, as always. I mean, to explain to you where digital and how digital transition helps in making sure that our strategies in getting, I mean, a more sustainable planet, biodiversity back to normal, all of this can help. And I would say there are many areas indeed that green and digital really friends. And I will start from this, and then of course I will move in areas where many things need to be done to make sure that digital is sustainable. Starting from the friendship or the brotherhood point of view, well, I would start with an activity that took us quite some time during the pandemic, which was to observe the movement and the patterns of movement of people. We did it to understand if confinement was working. We also did it, and there's a nice report that our Joint Research Center, GRC, has published to understand the link between the spread of the pandemic, temperature, humidity, and pollution. Now we are entering, unfortunately, the second year of the pandemic, and it's a known observed fact that, I mean, there's correlation between temperature and humidity and the pandemic, although there are many other factors such as density. And I mean, as very often it happens with the respiratory tract illnesses, there's also a possible link with pollution. Now, using the Copernicus satellites, we observed the usual, and in Copernicus, I mean, rendering, they are yellow spots around the most polluted areas of Europe. And as lockdown was progressing, those yellow spots started to shrink. And in some areas, it turned into green. So this was a clear indication that the man-made pollution is absolutely reversible, and actually with complete stalemate of our mobility, it basically disappeared. So this is a kind of byproduct of an extreme measure, which is the confinement that we have lived. But there's clear now evidence and observation that, I mean, if you start, I mean, slowing down mobility, there's a clear effect on pollution. It's intuitive. It's now also clearly observed. So what will be then the new normal, and what is the good part of, if you can call it good part of this tragedy, which has been this pandemic? Well, we hope that the new normal is what we called the distanceless society. What is the distanceless society? It's a bit an oxymoron, no, to say distance and less distance. Well, basically, it's the ability to be at the center of the stage, being it your working stage, your family life, your social life, and sometimes doing it from a distance, and that also applies to learning as well. So no matter whether you are in the middle of a beautiful country, European countryside, or you are in the city center, you will be part of it. That means that you need to move less, or you can choose how to move, when to move, and the pace on which you need to move. Not necessarily you have to rush in 1 hour in 2,000 kilometers away. non-necessary, I mean, you have, I mean, to queue in the morning to enter a city center. And as a matter of fact, you see already the signs. For instance, the new life of night trains. You know, night trains almost disappeared. And there were societies which were running these night trains, which were closing down. And suddenly, now we have seen again the enjoyment of a more relaxed trip. The same applies to habits now, which are more, I mean, sensitive to the fact that there's no necessity whatsoever, all of us to rush at the same time. For instance, the European Commission is changing the building policy and does it together with a more systematic use of teleworking, what we call the structured teleworking, with an impressive saving in terms of footprint, an energy footprint of our way of working together. So this new society, the distanceless society, it's without any doubt, when it comes to mobility and I mean the footprint of mobility, a much more sustainable society. Also, that means that maybe you don't need any more gigantic apps, but you can be much more distributed in the way you organize the planning of the travel, and that again means that the load in terms of the footprint can be different. So this is the first important and significant advantage of digitization. But to make it sustainable, of course, you need to make sure that this idea of distanceless society, learning and working, is embraced by universities, by corporations, by everyone. That means that you should never, ever go to a public office to request something, but whatever you need should come at home. Like, I mean, we have organized for the COVID certificates. And we have now presented the regulation that makes sure that everything you need or to certify your identity or everything you need can be done digitally, virtually, without any need to print paper or go to an office. But of course, this has been, as I said, underpinned by regulation. So we can actually make sure that in terms of self-organization of companies, organization of the schooling system, of the education system, we balance well what needs to be done collectively and what can be done by staying at home and traveling and moving less. And we can actually, and I will come to now the second step of why digital is so important for environment. We can measure those things. We can measure those things by sensors. I like very much what Florica said about the citizens projects. You know that since a couple of years we run a project which is called Wi-Fi for EU, which is basically free Wi-Fi given to communities. It's a totally free bonus we give to have a free and open Wi-Fi for citizens. One of the prime applications for this free Wi-Fi, it's actually sensors that citizens put around or communities put around to measure, I mean, what's going on in the environment. So the more sensors we have, the more projects we have about measuring, the more we understand. And of course, I mean, there are the macro measures which are coming from our Earth observation satellites, and that this is something that we do very much in cooperation with the European Space Agency. I welcome the Director of Earth Observation to be with us today. And the partnership with ESA and the organizations that provide satellite data now is entering a new dimension, completely new dimension, with not only measuring, not only acquiring the data, but then turning it into models and turning into something you can actually understand from the data. So the first reflex is, of course, to measure. I mean, those that suffer from increasing of the body weight, the first and most important indication that you get from the doctor is measure regularly your weight. Because the perception we have of things is completely different sometimes from the data we get. And that, I think, what happened in the last 50 years. No one took very seriously to measure what's going on in the environment. Or those that did it, or some of those that did it, well, they thought it's for another generation. It's not for me. Yes, I mean, certain things are increasing. I mean, temperature is rising. I mean, ice is melting. But, you know, fact of life. It's not a fact of life. It's a collective tragedy. And now that we want to seriously, constantly, I mean, put a remedy to this, we need to measure, make sure that every day, every single second, we measure what's going on. So measuring is the first step. But then, of course, with this gigantic amount of data, you can actually not do much if you don't have the possibility to read them in an intelligent way. And then it comes the modeling. And then it comes this fascinating idea of the digital twins. What is a digital twin? Digital twin is the digital copy in virtual format of something that exists in reality. I mean, so it could be the digital twin of everything you imagine, I mean, that you are able to model, I mean. And of course, we are very interested to two special digital twins, the digital twin of the Earth and the digital twin of our body. You can imagine why. But actually, there are other interesting digital twins of planets, digital twins of the universe, or industrial digital twins. For instance, large ships can be actually modeled through digital twins and maintained in a much more environment safe and cost with the enormous cost benefits. Cars, of course, have their digital twin, planes. So the digital twinning is a new avenue which is open because now we have many the availability of data in large quantities. We have algorithms, and most important, we have the computers now that can actually model, predict, and make sure that the twin is a very precise copy of what's going on. What is the biggest advantage of a digital twin? Well, you can break it. If you think about our body, you can test and see what happens. I mean, and you should not be that worried. How many times to you it happened that the doctor told you, take this pill and then call me and see what happens to you? I mean, now with the digital twin, you give the pill to the digital copy. And most important, talking about the environment, if we have a very precise digital twin of the Earth, we can understand what's going on, when it will happen, what will happen, and how to prevent that this is happening. Without waiting for the extreme consequences of an event, being, I mean, an extreme weather event, being, I mean, something that happens in a more distant time, with a longer time period, and then, of course, we maybe not be there to observe it, but we can actually anticipate what could happen in 2, 3, 4 centuries from now. So that is digital twinning, and for doing that, you need plenty of data, but an extreme precise model of what you need to process. So, and that's the art of the Destination Earth project. The Destination Earth project is the project we have proposed to create a digital twin of the Earth. The Destination Earth project basically will acquire all the possible data from, of course, primarily Earth observation satellite, but not only, from sensors, from other sources, and create an extremely precise model of the Earth, of the various processes, and of course of the oceans, and also make these models and this data available to scientists, to the civil society at large, in order to understand, test, prevent. It's of course a gigantic project, and we are very happy to have the partnership that we are established, first of all, inside the European Commission. There are many DGs that are partnering in this project. Of course, the two DGs that are close to the technical implementation, which is for the DG Connect, and for the satellites, DG TEFIS, but of course DG Research, DG Mare, DG Clima, DG Environment, and all the other users, I mean DG Agriculture, they are all part of these projects as contributors. And then we have a very great, very well-functioning partnership with the European Space Agency that will help us in implementing all this, with EUMETSAT and with the medium-range weather forecast centers, and other partners will join. And we start also to have many partners around the world. We are in discussions with India, we are in discussions with Brazil, we'll like to have many other partners around the world, because the more you can add in terms of models of data, the more you are welcome to be part of this project, which is not a project for just Europe. It's a project for the humanity. It is absolutely open in all its respect, and whoever has something to contribute will be welcome to contribute. The back office inside the bonnet, of course, there will be a network of very large supercomputers. There will be, I mean, data lakes, which will be mainly fed by our Copernicus satellites, Earth observation, meteorological satellites, weather sensors, and whatever else we can use, we should use in terms of data. And of course, the algorithms. And the more we have algorithms, the more will be added. So imagine the Earth as a spaceship, and you will have this fantastic control cockpit where you can have things under control. Our priorities to start this project will be, of course, the realization of the architecture, but then in the first wave, concentrate on extreme events. Extreme weather events are very dangerous. They are life-threatening, actually. They take lives. If we can predict them hours in advance or even more, this would allow us really to make a step change when it comes to protecting people and protecting, things which are affected by those events. And also to understand better how these events are, let's say, progressively coming up, and now, we can actually spot it, as I said, prevent and alert. But of course, this will be only one part, because we will all processes which also, are in the area of monitoring, the environment, modeling the environment, modeling, the evolution of the weather patterns, CO2 evolution, whatever you list it, will be part of the digital twin of the Earth. So this is, I mentioned two examples where there's a big friendship between digital and the environment. Let me mention a third one, which is energy monitoring, generation, and distribution. The more and more we go towards distributed energy source, clean energy sources such as solar energy, wind energy, the more we need to make sure that those distributed grids can be controlled and can actually distribute energy with a constant load, and make sure that everything is safe and well run. All of this requires artificial intelligence, requires data, requires interconnection of different networks. And by doing that, even if you have millions and millions of points where energy is generated, you can have a very, very constant load of the network and a smooth distribution of the energy. And then, of course, coming to our homes, if you measure water, how much water you consume in real time, you measure how much energy you consume from every plug. First of all, you save money. which is, I think, a big incentive for everyone. But then you save energy. So it has been calculated that you can save up to 20% of the energy if you actually are able to measure granularly inside homes every plug and every tap to make sure that we have in real time in our smartphone or wherever you like a clear idea. So some say that really to be green we have to shut down everything and return to a kind of life which is the life of the past. I'm not sure we have billions on the earth. I'm not sure this will be a very clever idea. I think it's a much more clever idea to live in a nice and green environment, but to be digitally connected. And that gives a much, much better overall result in terms of keeping our environment under control, making sure that we know what's going on and we know and predict how to get better. And the more we do that, the more also our environment will improve and we will have benefits. So I'm pleading really for green and digital in this sense to be friends, not to speak about the food chain and not to speak about the sustainable way to distribute food to avoid too much waste of food and food security. Now, let me go to the part where digital environment are not so much friends. Well, first of all, to store all this data, you need energy. You need, normally speaking, large data centers. First of all, we want to change this. We want to have much more distributed data storage and actually go and process the data where the data are. So the algorithms should travel, not the data. Because if the data travel less, you have less need of energy to distribute data around, less need of energy to have a gigantic data centers. The other thing is important is that the data centers have a carbon neutral footprint, but also, and this is also already a good starting point. We will have a network of supercomputers. One of these supercomputers up in Finland, I mean, it will be very, very fast. But I mean, it will be carbon negative in terms of CO2 footprint because actually it will be used to warm up the nearby village. This is really something that now we are taking a lot of attention to make sure that, I mean, whenever there's a computing resource, this computing resource should be carbon neutral or even better. And that's not enough. The next step, of course, is to be energy efficient. And energy efficient, you can do it by resorting to much more advanced technology in terms of advanced water cooling, making sure that, I mean, as I said, you don't design gigantic data center, but you distribute and you sponsor a new generation of microelectronics with low power consumption, extremely low power consumption. Our ambition is to have, by 2025, a very powerful AI, fit for AI microprocessor, which will be extremely low power consumption. Europeans might not be the first in terms of, I mean, producing number of chips, but they want to be the first in producing green chips and chips which consume less, and they also are much more environmental friendly. And of course, the more we say no to big data centers which consume a lot of energy and are not CO2 neutral, the more we say no to microelectronics which is not low power, the more we give a chance to these new technologies which are energy friendly and green friendly to take to actually take up. So one has to be mindful when consuming data, social media, whatever, what is behind. I mean, maybe ask what is behind. So that is something we take very seriously in terms of greening our computational space. The other thing that is to be taken very, very seriously is the electronic waste. I think it's simply unacceptable. Then the most powerful companies on earth, they give you devices that you can only throw away after a certain period. It's something that we should not accept. We should say no to this. We are not talking about small companies. We are not talking about the garage next door that does an experiment. We are talking about the largest corporation of the world that produce devices that they are obsolete after a couple of years. And then what you do with those devices, not very clear. So we need much more modular electronics. We need repairable devices. We need devices that last much longer. And this is possible. I mean, don't get fooled. It is possible. But it takes, the willingness, the commitment of everyone to do that. It takes money to develop much better batteries, which are environment friendly. It takes less profit, of course, but the money is there. And so we will continue in sponsoring with the European research and funding very, very smart batteries, which are actually green. But of course, the private sector also has to invest heavily into those devices. Reusable electronic, repairable electronics, green batteries. We want to see this commitment coming, because otherwise, the amount of electronic waste will only increase. It will not decrease if you have a little bit the feeling of your drawer full of wires, small old chargers or old phones. Those drawers are increasing in our house, and this is not good. So this is an area where we need to work more. To conclude, for me, in balance, green and digital are really twins and are really friends, and we can only gain by having this transformation, once in a lifetime transformation of our society. But of course, when it comes to, how to get digital, we have to work hard to make sure that how to get digital is sustainable and good for our environment. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roberto. We have meanwhile received several questions. I know that Florica had to leave for urgent appointment with our commissioner. I will try to read to you 3 questions. You can kind of choose or put them together, because we then need to move to Tony from ESA, since he is also on a tight schedule. Now, I would read to you the questions that are coming mostly from United Nations representative, David Jensen, and that deals with the digital product passport. If it's successful in Europe, what do we need to do to be successful globally? There is another question that needs a little bit of explanation. If digital is normally linked to progress on the economic dimension, how do we ensure that at the same time we can progress on social and environmental dimension, which you basically responded, but we still need to make sure that these 3 dimensions of sustainability, economic, social, and environmental are served and are enhanced by proper digitalization. And then there's a question about measuring the environment. We are doing that, but what about the behavior of people, and what can digital do around that? So thank you, Roberto, for entertaining that as much as you can.
Yeah, in the interest of time, these are very important and very deep questions that would deserve a very long answer, and I'm sure Tom and the other speakers might pick up on those. So I will give a very, very brief answer, and apologizing for this. Europe, of course, tries to set up the bar for digital very high and for green very high. For digital, we like to say we like a human-centric digital transformation, which respects people, respects democracy, respects, the people to have, by the way, the right information, and the right means scientifically validated information, for instance, about climate. All of this, it's on off. It's not a secret, it's not in the secret drawers. We have done the COVID certificate. We have done it for Europe, and it works. We have put 500 million citizens on using a digitally validated, virtually, I mean, without need to print a certificate. But we have done it on open software, and it's available to anyone else in the world who wants to do it. And we will continue like this. When I speak about the processor, we like to use open standards to do that. So it takes, of course, the willingness of others to join this and to make sure that, I mean, they think alike. Of course, these are tough choices. These are not choices that come from free. And that's why they need to be diluted in time. And that's why when we have partnership in the world, of course, we favor and we like to continue to have this, especially, I mean, with the organizations such as UN, to try, I mean, and spread this way of doing things, which with a bit of selfish reflex, we call it the European way, but it could become the world way of doing things. I think the other point which I like to remark is this point of what people should do. I touched it in my speech, but it's worthwhile repeating. I mean, when people want to weight less and so lose weight, they actually measure themselves more frequently on the scale. I think this should be a reflex that we should all do. I mean, to understand our footprint, to understand, I mean, whether what we do is optimized when it comes to movements, when it comes to energy, when it comes to water, and that now technology is here to help. Data are here to help. Of course, those data are your data in your wallet. They should not be, I mean, if you don't want to pass to others, but it's important that you actually construct a sort of personal green portfolio where you actually store the data of what you do and how you can improve in terms of your footprint. Many thanks.
Thank you, Roberto. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tony. Tony Tolker Nielsen, who is the director of the Earth Observation Program at ESA. Tony was before ESA in CERN, where he was responsible for the design and guidance systems for elementary particle beams. And since '87, he's in ESA. And in particular, in 2003, he joined the Launcher Directorate, responsible for the return to flight program of Ariane 5 that was launched already in December 2002. He became a member of ESA Executive Board, and since 2019, he's heading the Earth Observation Program. So it's very relevant and we are very eager to hear from you, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I have prepared a presentation to try to show how well our Earth Observation Program addresses both the green transition and also the digital transition. So I'll go to the next slide. I hope it works. It doesn't. Okay. So a green economy, what is it and how? So the European Green Deal aims to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean circular economy and stop climate change and revert biodiversity loss. We heard about this from the previous speakers. And the green economy aims to reduce environmental risks and ecological scarcities and target sustainable development without degrading the environment. So, a transition built on a foundation of data and science. That's what we need. So Earth observation data is a powerful tool that ensures accurately and timely reporting of the environmental indicators defined in the European Green Deal. EO provides a system for auditing progress measuring based on reliable science-based data. And the ability to monitor Europe and the whole world on a daily basis is unprecedented. So satellite data are central in helping the transition to a sustainable economy. So here I just show you our fleet of satellites. We have presently 16 in operation. We have science satellites, which are innovative satellites, both in terms of technology and also in terms of the science that these satellites address. So this started already 25 years ago with the ERS satellites, and we had a very big ENVISAT satellite, which was exactly a satellite to monitor the environment. Then we have the Copernicus segment that are led by the European Commission or the European Union, and here we have presently in orbit Sentinel-1, 2, and 3, and Sentinel-5P and Sentinel-6. We have more of them, of Sentinel-1, 2, and 3 in the pipeline, so copies that will be launched starting next year, actually, with Sentinel-1C in December. And then we are developing a new type of satellites, new types that I will address later, so I'm not going to it now. And then we have the meteorology segment where we are, it started actually as early as 77 with the first launch of METOP. Today we have in the pipeline actually satellites that will cover until the 30s with METOP second generation in low Earth orbit and MTG, Meteosat third generation, which is a geostationary system of two types of satellites. So this today we have actually 38 satellites under development, and we are preparing 14 new missions that are in pre-studies, if you call it like that. So I go to the next. So what is it that is needed to monitor climate from space? Many of them are obvious. Sea ice, we are measuring sea ice and ice sheets. We have been doing that for a very long time, and I'll show you some statistics of this. We are measuring the atmospheric composition, both in terms of aerosols, so particles, and greenhouse gases, and ozone. We are measuring the sea level to monitor sea level rise, and the sea state, meaning the waves, and also the ocean color to determine algae growth and things like that, and the salinity and the sea surface temperature. Then we are measuring water vapor in clouds. We are measuring the soil moisture and the land surface temperature. We are measuring biomass, land cover. What is it desert? Is it forest? Is it agricultural land? And we can also monitor fires in nature. And we can monitor the state of lakes. Of course, we can look at glaciers, snow, and permafrost. So these are the parameters. The World Meteorological Organization defined 54 essential climate variables, and we can actually measure the 36 of them from space. And ESA's climate change initiative are now monitoring 21 of these 36. And we are expanding that now to be able to cover all what can be observed from space. But at the moment, we are monitoring 21. So these are the first generation I talked about. So we have Sentinel-1, which is a radar satellite. Sentinel-2 is an optical satellite, which are monitoring in several spectral bands. And And Sentinel-3 is mainly an ocean mission measuring the state of the ocean. Sentinel-4 is becoming an instrument on the Meteosat third generation to measure the atmospheric composition. And Sentinel-5P is already in orbit, and Sentinel-5 will be an instrument to monitor global air monitoring to the atmospheric composition from the METOP second generation in low Earth orbit. So Sentinel-4 is geostationary and monitor only over Europe, but all the time, whereas Sentinel-5 will be in low Earth orbit, so we'll see the complete Earth, but only from time to time. And Sentinel-6, which is charting the sea level. So I go on. And here, actually, that's where the digital comes in. All this is data, of course, digital data. And we are generating 250 terabytes of EU data daily. And they are being disseminated freely to the society. So here are just some of the parameters and phenomena that are measured by the Copernicus system. So chlorophyll, sea level height, sea surface temperature, etc. I will not go into the details. Here I just show you an example of sea level due to ice. So Greenland and Antarctica are losing ice 6 times faster than in the 90s today. And these polar ice sheets are now responsible for 1/3 of all sea level rise. And losses are on track with the IPCC's worst case climate warming scenario. So that means that we are actually in the very worst case. And here we can see. No, I have a problem with my computer. It doesn't want to show this film. Maybe if I do like this, yeah. It should play. It doesn't play. Anyway, on this curve, you're supposed to see the sea level, which is really rising, but for some reason it doesn't work. I'm sorry for that. No, I can't get it to work. Okay, I'll go to the next one. So this is the new Copernicus missions, the expansion missions. So there is a CO2M mission, which is measuring anthropogenic CO2, which is a major cause of climate change, as you all know. We have a new satellite called Crystal, which are polar ice and snow topography. So that's also the effects of climate change we are measuring with this. Then we have CMR, which is a passive microwave radiometer. It measures sea surface temperature and ice concentration. We have the land surface temperature mission, which is, as its name is saying, measuring the land surface temperature. And this is mainly for agriculture and urban management. We have CHIME, which is a hyperspectral imaging mission. So this is about food security. It's about the soil composition and minerals. And actually, we can measure biodiversity. Each type of plant has a certain spectral footprint. And that allows with this satellite to actually determine which plants are growing where. And ROSE-L, which is a radar satellite in L-band, which are measuring vegetation and ground motion, and also ground moisture. So I go on. Now we come to where it comes together. The future of data integration and information extraction will actually be the digital twin that Roberto was explaining. So here I can click on this. Yeah. So Destination Earth is a flagship initiative of the European Commission, which is run by DigiConnect. And there is a strategic partnership with ESA, the European Centre for medium-term weather forecast, and EUMETSAT. And it will be a federated cloud-based platform for Earth system modeling and simulation. A very high precision digital model of the Earth to monitor and simulate natural and human activity. And this project we are starting up now will be a way to be able to do what-if analysis. For example, if we continue to deforest, what will happen in the next 10, 50, 100 years. We are starting up now establishing the platform, the architecture, and we are also building two twins, which are the extreme weather and geophysical events twin and a twin on climate change. So that will be the first two, but there will be many more, and it will really be the way to exploit the huge amounts of data with high performance computing, artificial intelligence, etc. And it will be people coming to the platform. There will be software tools on the platform which will be available for scientists to use in the cloud. So I think that was it for me. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Donny. We have a question for you that is kind of directed to what you presented. What are the trade-offs between space observation and development of on-site sensor systems and drone-based observations?
This is a very good question. Thank you very much. I think we need both space-based observation, but also in situ observations. So we will need the two, and the two will be used in what Roberto called the data lake. There will be both space-based observation and ground-based observation. So I don't know whether there really is a trade-off between the two. There are things you can only measure from space. So that we will do from space, but there are also things that we can measure on ground. For example, sea level, you can measure from ground as well. But you get a global mapping with a satellite, which is not possible to have so many ground sensors. So actually there are both ground sensors measuring sea level height, but also satellite. And of course the data are correlated. And actually we use a lot of ground sensors to calibrate our space-based observations. Now, about drones, this is something we are looking into because sometimes it might be interesting to have drones. We call them high-altitude platforms, and it's something that are the drones at a very high altitude, actually. So we are 30, 40 kilometers in altitude. And there are things that are interesting to measure from there. And this is something we are looking into, and it's developing. So, yeah, I think in 10, 20 years, you will see both ground measurements, measurements from high altitude platforms, and also measurements from satellites orbiting the Earth.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Johnny. There is a lot of interest. I note on the sli.do that a lot of participants would like to know more about this project, Destination Earth, what you're doing and what we'll be doing jointly. So please, all of you that would like to know more, let's take it offline. We will try to send you information as the project develops. What are the major deliverables? What are the plans for the future? So we can send that to you offline. Now, allow me to remind you again that for those that joined us again during the session, that this is the first session of Connect University Summer School. We have possibility to ask questions. It's also channeled via YouTube and other possible channels that you can see every session. The Slido's hashtag is #GreenEconomy. So if you want to pose a question, we will have enough time for question answer at the end of the session. So we have one more speaker, and that is Mr. Boštjan Videmšek. He's journalist and writer, and he published more than 100 international newspapers and magazines. He published in New York Times, Spiegel, Sydney Morning Herald, Geo, El Periódico, Politico, and many others. He's a winner of several international and national awards. He's author of 6 books, namely 2 Dispatches from the Front Line of Humanity and Plan B, which, as you can imagine, deals with climate change. And that was the book of the year for Slovenia. He's author of 2 theater plays and he was awarded European Young Leader of 2015. He's also one of our ambassadors of the Climate Pact Action, and he is now moving, basically, in one word, from war correspondent to climate change solving problems. So, Boštjan, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. It's an absolute privilege to be here. I come from a slightly different world, and where technology is not the key player. What I would like to say first is that always when I'm listening or reading about climate, about the solutions and the fight with the climate crisis, with the climate change, or on the other hand, the digitalization and all the green ideas, green plans, green deals, my first and foremost thought always is democracy. I mean, there are many researchers, investigative journalism cases which are directly proving connection between the level of openness of the societies and the level of awareness of what we have to do, and the climate change is here, and there is no other choice than to confront it with the way how we live, with the change of our lifestyles. And being a war correspondent for more than 20 years gave me a slightly different overview or insight than, I don't know, scientists or politicians have. I mean, traveling around all the places from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Darfur to Syria, from Libya to the DR Congo, from Somalia to Gaza, through all the Sahel region. What I've seen is that the places which are the platform or the geography of modern conflicts, 99%, I would say, are the hottest, the driest, and those who are most hit by the direct consequences of climate change. And these are mostly the places which are not really modern in the way of technology. These are also places where the level of democracy or openness of the society is low. So the discussion we have here, in my opinion, it's kind of, don't understand me wrong, elitistic first class or exclusive class discussion. We should never forget that a big part of the world is a bit alienated from the technological perspective, from the fight with the consequences of climate change. because the need for survival, the need to live from day to day, it's an absolute priority. So in my opinion, whenever we talk about any kind of green plans or green deals or digitalization, we have to be really empathic and show solidarity, because it's an absolute privilege to be able to afford the transition which we in European Union are stepping into. And that exactly what I'm saying was the how to say, the turning point of my journalistic or writer's career, because after I was more or less reporting from the wars and writing about the conflicts which are not stopping, which have never stopped, and I suppose will be ongoing. We live in the era or in the age of never-ending, forever going, as some people say, conflicts, from Afghanistan to Syria, from Iraq to, I don't know, Darfur, Somalia. So that was a huge frustration for me. And what I found out is that it's really easy, somehow easy, do not get me wrong, to write about consequences, to describe what is wrong. And there was in the same noticing that in many cases the climate change, the climate crisis was one of the main drivers of the conflicts. I found out that it would be much more constructive, much smarter, and also, not to sound too vain, in my opinion, more ethical to change the platform, to change the narrative, and to step out of the, I don't know, if a war reporter is telling about stepping out of the comfort zone, that's a bit odd, but yes, stepping out of my comfort zone and start reporting in the way that I will not only, show tragic events, but also offer solutions. And now I'm talking about the climate change related solutions, of course, because I consider climate change as the main problem of humanity. Of course, not only humanity. And just describing, to use Michael Mann's kind of paraphrase, just describing the consequences, just describing the ugly part of the ugly part of it is alienating the public. It's making people inactive, not only passive. Inactive is, I would say, an active phase of passivity, and we cannot afford to be inactive in the times when where time is really running fast and running out. So I've decided, together with the photographer Matthias Kripitz, to actually make a tour around the world, and mostly, of course, around Europe, and find the best already existing practices, solutions, namely solutions in the fight against climate crisis. And one of the goals in this project, called Plan B, How Not to Lose Hope in the Times of Climate Crisis, which has also become a book last year, was to identify main driving forces, main drivers of different communities, different societies, which have changed their not only point of view, but point of reaction, action, which have changed their ways of life, which have changed their lifestyles, which have changed their approach to crucial economical, social, political, of course, and environmental questions. And we got on the tour, which started, I mean, not in a chronological way, but the main story of the book is, and I'm trying to offer it as a particular local solution, which I'm trying to offer as one of the possible global ones. It's a small Greek island of Tilos in Dodecan Islands, which was a total social, economical, and demographic catastrophe maybe 15, 20 years ago. The island was empty, or the people who lived there were majority really old. There was no industry. There was the tourism was close to zero, and the island was like totally forgotten. And then a young doctor came from Athens, who was looking for a place where he can actually establish his own practice. And what he did, it's truly amazing. He never only worked as a doctor. His name was Tasos Periferis, but he started immediately changing the DNA or the social substance of the island. He created a sense of community. He put best and the brightest of the island together, and in a couple of years, the island became the first the first place in Greece which has organized the same-sex marriage. The first place in Greece which has prohibited hunting, the first place in Greece which has fully repaired all the antique shepherd pets. And these are analog solutions, and these are analog moves while we are talking about digital ones, but I'm on the way there. And through this, the island has recovered, people start coming back, younger people start coming back, tourists came there, and the society, the community as such, was growing. And the doctor became a mayor. The island is rather small, and the mayors are not political. They don't come from the political parties. They're chosen by the people, the kind of direct democracy. And this man has decided also to do everything in his power for the environment, with the fight with climate change, of course, because this part of the Mediterranean was getting more and more dry. There was no rain. Extreme events, weather events were more and more frequent, and it was obvious that slowly and slowly things are going to hell. And but then he died, and his son has kind of has followed his path, and a new mayor became Miss Maria Kama. And what they have done is immediately they started to kind of look to the possibilities how to become completely self-sustainable in matters of energy, in matters of food, in matters of transport, etc. And with the help of some Greek universities, with the help of scientists, and with the very, how to say, beautiful, nice help of the EU Horizon 2020 program, program with the financial help, they have made a project called the Tilos project, and the Tilos project was how to become self-sustainable as soon as possible in the way of energy. And with they have with the help of scientists in university, they have created a very modern and advanced battery storage system, and established a hybrid wind and photovoltaic sun power plant. And in spring 2009, Tilos has officially become the first energy-wise self-sustainable island in Mediterranean. In this very moment, more than 10 Greek islands are following the path, and the island has been visited by many politicians and scientists from all over the world, from the island communities, and not necessarily only island communities, from coastal communities with similar geography and similar weather conditions, where they can kind of copy-paste or copy-paste the extremely successful case of the island of Tilos. Here I would like to add that since I was covering refugee crisis for many years and following all the migrant routes, this is the way how I come in touch with Tilos and its self-sustainability success story, because I was covering the story of refugees coming from Turkey to Greece, and Tilos was not one of the islands where people on the run wanted to go. It was the place where they were brought by sheer incident or, in worst cases, accident. So, and the Tilos didn't have any infrastructure. It was not involved in the Greek asylum system infrastructurally, and not, of course, also not in the UNHCR. And they have, in the same time where they were developing the self-sustainable energy technology, they were developing very, very promising, empathic, humanistic, beautiful way of taking care of refugees, their own case, called Tilos Hospitality Project. And all these elements have come together. So that's why Tilos really is a successful story, and a story which should be followed, in my opinion, by many European countries, or islands, or cities, or communities, because it has all the elements which are required for the successful way to the green future. And also, they were really active in this area with the smart grid, etc., in the way of digitalization. First, they have fixed their analog problems, and then they made this, how to say, a giant leap, giant step towards the green and digitalized future, but always claiming the solidarity first, democracy first, open society first, diversity on all levels, not only biodiversity first. So, and that's how this has become really a really good, really recognized and known story, and now it's kind of study case. And what I found out is that Tilos is definitely not alone. When I was researching, I found out that there are like dozens of cases which I should visit, and this is what we did. And we made a similar story in Orkney Islands, in northeast Scotland. Orkney Islands host the European Centre for Marine Energy, energy harvested from the sea. It's waves and tidal energy, and it's also not only extremely promising, but also already existing practices in the fight with climate crisis, with zero or neutral carbon imprint. And the islands, or the Orkney Islands, are, I mean, when I'm reading about positive cases around Europe, and I'm reading the programs of different countries, how will they attract money from EU, this a gross amount of money which is available now in huge historical chance to change the continent. I don't see much emphasis or how to say focus on the marine energy, but marine energy, it's extremely promising, and the case of Orkney Islands proves it. This was also one of the, how to say, forgotten places. They were really behind the Scotland average BDP, the UK average BDP, and the way of life, the quality of life was low. But 3 years ago, the Orkney Islands were voted, mostly the capital Kirkwall, as the place with the highest quality of life in the whole UK, and that says a lot how the transformation from analog and slow and dirty lifestyle and energy to green and, of course, digitalized, because these are twin brothers or sisters, as it was mentioned before. by Mr. Viola, it's opening a chance for all of us to live better and more. Of course, living better means living more sustainable, and it's really a great case. And in 2017, if I'm correct, the Orkney Islands were already producing, not by the Meran energy, which was still in the pilot phase, I would say, 130% of energy they needed, because with the Meran energy coming in, with all the investments coming in, they found out that renewable energy is their future, but not only Meran energy. They have started building wind turbines all over, with the help of tariffs and the UK support. Essentially, all big farmers on the island have made their own little power plants and producing much more energy than they needed for their own for the functioning of their farms and their lifestyles, and they put it back in the grid and got money for it. But then there was more and more energy harvested, and they found out that it would be too expensive to put it back in the grid because the grid was not good enough, it was too old. And the investment into a new grid connecting the islands and the mainland, and the island of UK was too expensive. But what have they decided? The community there, of course, in the connection with the European Centre for Meran Energy, is that they will invest all surplus renewable energy to the production of green hydrogen. And already in 2019, they were producing relatively big amounts of green hydrogen. When we are talking about the hydrogen, it has to be green, or there is no debate about any renewables or neutral carbon footprint. So, with this green hydrogen, they start transformation of their transport issues. The old oil-driven, diesel-driven ferries, the public transport between the cities or villages on the islands, and that was also remarkably successful. So another case where community-based idea with the support of European Union has made tremendous success, and a study case for everybody else. Of course, inside of the limited geography and weather conditions, but Orkney Islands are definitely not the same. Same goes for, as I said before, Iceland and its geothermal success story. Geothermal, it's also could be part of European Green Deal transition. And what we have found out is that where you have the biggest awareness of the reality, of the harsh reality of climate crisis, climate change is too soft, in my opinion. We have to talk about the crisis all the time. The crisis, which is, as has been said before, between the lines has already become a new normal, a new normality, is that in the places where people are already facing the consequences, the direct consequences of climate change, the reaction is much faster than in the, climate-wise or weather-wise places, privileged places, like parts of Central Europe, for example. The reaction is much slower. So first you have to have your face-to-face meeting or date with the consequences of climate crisis. Then you have to have very brave, courageous individuals who are willing to lead their communities and to are willing to start step out the comfort zone and to change their lifestyles. Then you have to have a community which has the sense for solidarity. And when you have all these, then you have to be, how to say, honest enough to say that we cannot fight the climate change, the climate crisis, without enough financial resources. So to add to the first three avenues, or to the first three needed actors in the fight with climate crisis, what I identified is, how to say, a business time for business. The people who have the initiative, who have this liberal mindset, who can build the projects, and who have the knowledge to apply for all the tenders out there, are super needed, and are, how to say, a gold mine for projects like that. And here is how we found two other very promising options to be added to the, how to say, Green Deal, or the digitalization of the European Union. Not only European Union, I would say Europe, because there is also Norway and Iceland included in our research, and these cases are interconnected with EU somehow. It's, of course, carbon capture and storage, in my opinion, pretty promising technology, let's be honest, which is, how to say, a child of oil and gas industry, but which has become really promising in the way of lowering the carbon emission, the CO2 emissions. And we have made a gigantic research, visited different places, and found out that essentially Norway is the leading country here. And last year, the Norwegian Parliament has approved one of the two cases which we have presented in our book. And Norway is going, how to say, full force with the carbon and capture storage program. On the other side, there is probably everybody who's involved in the renewable energy and the Green Deal story knows already about this company. There is a Swiss company with the German owners called Climeworks, based in Hinwil, close to Zurich. And this company has produced, it's also one of our study cases, one of our chapters in the book, in the project, which has developed direct air capture technology, capturing CO2 directly from the air with the help of amines through the filters, and making it in a liquid forms, and also in gas forms, and using it for different things, from producing biofuels, also biokerosene for the airplanes, to producing the soft drinks for the production, and using it also in farming. But what really has changed, this has been a couple of years ago when I first heard about this company. It has been a startup. They have developed this energy with the Harvard University in Basel. It was super successful, but it was not really promising because it was small, it was kind of lonely in its development, in the way it was developing its technology. But in last year, things have, exploded in a positive way. They have, and here also the two stories I'm describing in my book, which are coming together with the project, the Carbon Flex program. That's the way how with the renewable energy, with geothermal energy, geothermal plant, the second biggest in the world, the biggest in Iceland, in Hellisheide, close to Reykjavik, is injecting, first capturing the CO2 from the air, directly from the air, with the renewable energy and the technology from Climeworks. They are injecting CO2 to deep down in basaltic rocks, where they mineralize and also become rocks, and it's completely safe to do that. This has been a pilot project when I visited the place first, but in the last couple of months, in the last year, but with the real, biggest high pace in the last couple of months, the Icelandic national energy company Orca has signed a huge contract with Climeworks, and this will become the technology of the future of storing CO2 into basaltic rocks. So if you go around, if you put together, there are so many promising cases, already working practices, already working technologies and solutions, which if you put them in one place, you have a manual for the future. You have some kind of a guide tour, and with the money and the political will, which is now present in Brussels, in big part of Europe, I found it super promising when we are discussing the green future of Europe and the digitalization of Europe, and especially with the awareness in younger generations, plus the direct existential threat of climate change, of climate crisis as such. I see it as the only way to go further. But it's super important that, if I go back to the beginning and close this talk, that when we talk about this, we never forget that technology, it's as such, is an empty shell. It's only a tool. If it's not filled with proper social tissue, if it's not driven by the change of social platform, social, economical, and political paradigm, then every tool, technological tool, can turn to a kind of weapon. We have to be super careful when we talk about technologies, especially in the times where our democracy is in the process of erosion. Thank you.
Thank you, Boštjan. Thank you very much for the last concluding message. That is very clear. Now we have time for question and answers. We would be basically two of us because the other speakers had to go. So let us take it from the beginning. There is a question about that may be more relevant for you. Success is not about technology only. It's about driving new culture. And you basically touched upon it, but did you see that the culture of people is changing where you've seen the proper use of technology? The awareness, the action, the personal commitment?
Definitely. I mean, it's interconnected. Technology works properly if society works properly. You know, not in this order, I would say. In many places we have visited, this has become a new reality, and it's super promising. And it's driven by solidarity, by the awareness that the climate change has no borders. The climate crisis is not something that is happening to somebody else anymore. That it's not something exotic. And what I would really like to mention is that everybody probably knows the Daniel Kahneman, and he has a great point about how people, societies, different countries, cities, all of us are reacting versus the climate crisis. It's if put it in 2-3 sentences. Kahneman says that we are just not evolutionarily wired to react to something that is not a direct threat, something that is not here and now endangering our lives, or something that can commit horrible injury in the present moment. That's why, in his opinion, we are absolutely too slow. And we really don't know what to do when somebody says, okay, in 10, 20, 50 years, your city will be underwater. In 20 years, your village will be too hot to live in. You say, okay, it's horrible, but, and then you become passive or inactive, to quote Michael Mann again. So it's something much more is needed than waiting. And what we have really found out is that the societies, the communities, which are really already facing strong and harsh consequences of climate crisis, are reacting faster, much more coherent, and with the existential, I would say, determination. And it's of course affecting also the culture itself, because it's pulling out people from the comfort zone.
Thank you. There's another question that may be interesting for you, and that is, what about any thoughts about the intersection of the digital and green and geopolitics? Any feedback, any idea that comes to your mind?
It's a huge battleground, and we know it's already here. This is kind of my territory. I mean, I'm also a geopolitical analyst, and what I'm following is the green transition is becoming also a strong field of a new, let's call it in a bit of cliche way, Cold War. It's dominating also the narrative in the relations. Let's say, for example, US and China. It's present in Europe, which is being kind of cornered with its dependence on Russian gas, and on the other side, trying to step out of this, how to say, toxic addiction in many ways, political, geopolitical, and mostly environmental. And I found it as one of the driving forces behind the idea of realization of the idea of the Green Deal. And on the other hand, of course, we have all the gas lines, the new projects. We have the story, if we stay in our, let's say, close neighborhood of Eastern Mediterranean, which has last summer become nearly a new battlefield with so many actors involved. We have, and it's behind its question of energy, behind is the question of geopolitics, and of course geography. Geography as such right now is more than ever after the fall of the Berlin Wall, in my opinion, dominating the geopolitics. And if you put geography in the context of environment, you have geopolitics as such.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. There are several other questions. I will take maybe a couple of them, and then we see, because you have visited the places and you've seen what green digital can do. But what about destroying ecosystems? In order to produce all these equipment and technologies to solve the green issue, you can actually create problems with biodiversity, mining, and destroy some of the habitat. What have you observed, and what would be your suggestion?
Yeah, you're asking me a question I would ask myself now. You know, it looks like a setup. Now, second part of Plan B project is actually dedicated to the transition of traffic, to the transition of mobility. And one part of it, a big part of it, we were working on it for more than 2.5 years. It's called Lithium Highway. And we were following 1 gram of lithium from high up in the Bolivian Andes in Salar de Uyuni to the Chinese factories, electric car and lithium battery factories. And we were focusing not only on, of course, on the economy and the geopolitics behind it, but mostly on the environmental impacts of so-called clean energies and the transition, which is proclaiming itself to be the solution for our emission problems. And what we have found out that already, especially at Salar de Uyuni, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world, up there, nearly 4,000 meters. Things are going completely different direction as one would want to. Chinese companies over there have kind of privatized the only two water sources for indigenous population, for example. The great whiteness of sli.do unit, the biggest sulfate in the world, has become a gigantic lithium mine. And how to say, after 10 years of nearly no rain and huge impact of climate change, the local lifestyles, especially the pastoralists, the llama and the alpaca herders, and the quinoa growers, which produce their own really.
We lost your sound, I think.
Yeah, but I didn't do anything.
Okay, now it's okay.
Yeah, when did you lose me?
No, just 2 seconds. That's okay.
All right. No, I just want to say that I mean, going there with huge optimism that the lithium could change the Bolivian society, one of the poorest Latin American countries. We have found out that this really is not the case, that geopolitics is playing a great game, that China is coming in the way that all colonial powers were doing it, I don't know, in 19th, 18th or 17th century. So that the environment doesn't count, but all under the pretext of renewable energy, of electric mobility, of, yes, kind of green and digitalized future. We have to be super careful when, especially those of us who go out there and see things with our own eyes, and to tell the true story, to tell the honest story. It really reminds me on these palm oil documentaries and, about the huge greenwashing behind the industry. So the transition has many faces, and we all have to be honest enough to show them all.
Thank you. There's a question about how can developing countries take advantage of this green and digital? Is it a matter of resources, or can it be done in frugal ways or more economic ways? What about the less developed world that you started with your speech, that doesn't really have the luxury to think of green digital transition? Can they adapt something based on their resources and knowledge?
It's a really hard question. We can put it in different perspectives and in different contexts. First, I don't think that same rules should apply to the traditionally biggest polluters and those who are developing a bit slower but with bigger pace in last 10, 20, or 30 years. It's just not historically fair. And this is already, if you return back to geopolitics, creating new problems. But on the other hand, I don't know, in the region of Sahel, for example, I see an enormous, huge opportunity for harvesting of renewable energy, of course, mostly sun. And that means many new chances to get job opportunities, and also recoveries of communities which have been neglected or which have kind of failed in the last couple of years or decades. Then you have this huge idea, also lately been hugely supported by European Union, of green belt, and this could be, in the terms of migration also, and refugee, which is the main motivation from the European side, a great opportunity for the region to pacify first and then to build kind of sustainable future in all possible aspects. As I said, we should not consider climate change as something that has borders or it's limited to our own needs, our own satisfying of needs.
Yeah, there are several questions that I may actually give a quick answer, but before doing that, let me remind you a couple of things again. This is the first session out of 16 sessions that we do this next 2 weeks. The next one will be at 2 o'clock on Green Deal and data space. That's why looking at some of the questions that deal with data, maybe you can hold your horses and try to come back when we will actually deal with the data and data spaces and examples of best kind of databases for reuse. There are questions about the energy. You know, what does it take from digital and the energy? Just to tell you that, just two figures for you to put it in perspective. The energy consumption, the electricity consumption of the digitalization, all of it, is about 5 to 8%, depends on some of the estimates. So 5% at least of all the electricity that we consume goes to the digital. And two big chunks are the data centers and the telecoms. Those at the moment may actually grow, but what we really expect and what the biggest companies say is that they will be on renewables by 2030. So as the climate footprint, as the CO2 equivalent or GHG emissions comes, this would actually will be driven down to zero, normally by 2040, maybe even before 2050. So in general, that should not be a problem. What we should really focus on is the waste, is the materials. And that's where geopolitics comes into. We need raw materials to build all this technology. So if we don't create a culture to keep the durability, software updatability of the consumer electronics, which is the major e-waste of today, the fastest growing e-waste, if we don't get the culture of keeping our mobiles, for example, 1 year longer, means between now and 2030 in Europe, means million cars lifetime emissions. Just if we do one little step to keep our device longer. At the same time, we have the IoT revolution coming. So the connected devices, sensors will be everywhere, cars, homes, industries, fields. That would be about 25 billion of them to be deployed between now and 2025. And that, if we don't design them for durability, and if every time there is a software update, we have to throw away 25 billion things to replace them for next 2 years with another 25 to 50 billion things by 2030, you understand we cannot go like that. It's a matter of energy, it's less matter of energy and more matter of material. So if you just think of it, this is a blind eye that people sometimes have. They focus on energy and ICT. We need to create a culture where we can use equipment for longer and better. So this is on some of the questions that deal with the crypto and what have we learned about ICT. I would propose that we basically stop here. The same thing is also about 5G. People ask, what is about 5G deployment? What's going to do? 5G will reduce the energy intensity. We will do much more with 5G. With the same amount of energy, we will do 10 times to 100 times more with 5G. But still, we will need to deploy 5G stations that will be more dense than 4G. And 5G will come on top of 4G. So 4G will not be taken away immediately. So there will be a need for digitalization in order to give the capacity to green. But all that we are, as DigiConnect, watching that we drive to zero as much as possible the energy, the non-renewable energy consumption, and we're trying to optimize, and we have initiative on Circular Electronics Initiative. Of course, we will need to work with DG Environment, and a lot of colleagues are watching us to make sure that this is not on the expense of natural resource, biodiversity, and pollution, because those things we need to square. And that's why today we have seen the two leaders of digital and environment to make sure that we are on the same page and the steps are taken together. And that's Commission's highest priority at the moment, green digital. So Bostian, thank you very much. That was really inspiring, a lot of good examples. People can contact you, of course, offline and come back to you. Some of these examples that you give, if that's from their regions or they have a particular interest. Anybody on the participants list, please know that we will have 2 weeks. We already have close to 9,000 registrations for the next 2 weeks. Make it interactive. Don't be shy of asking questions. We will keep those questions. Sometimes you can answer to each other. you are free to post a question and actually answer to each other. So you can create a discussion in the Slido if you want to, answering yourselves some of the questions that people pose. So thank you very much again for today's participation, and see you at 2 o'clock at the Green Deal and Data Space. Thank you. Thank you, Bastian.